My name is Camille Stratton. I wore the uniform for 11 years. 6 of them in silence. 3 of them in fire and 2 in shadows no one will ever read about. I walked into the courtroom wearing my old service dress blues. They still fit. No medals on the chest, no ribbons. Just the fabric, the crease, and the name stitched over my heart, Stratton. To the left, my mother wouldn't look at me. My brother Ethan sat upright, arms folded like this was some business dispute. My uncle, the one who once called me soldier girl like it was a joke, smirked like he'd already won. They had filed the suit together, stolen valor. A legal way to say I was a fraud. That I had never served. That I had faked it all. No press, no recognition, no public awards, no record they could find. I sat down alone, the defense side nearly empty. No lawyer, just me. The judge read the charges. Then came a pause. The doors at the back opened. A man in full 4-star uniform entered the courtroom. His steps were steady. His eyes found mine like he'd been waiting years. He approached the bench and said 5 words. Permission to testify, Your Honor. And when the judge asked his relation to me, he didn't look at them. He looked only at me and said, She didn't serve under me. We served under her. And just like that, everything changed. Before you hear the whole story behind that moment, if you've ever been abandoned, hurt by your own family, and still forced to smile through it, leave a comment. I'm not telling this to complain, but because, maybe somewhere, you've felt what I felt. Now, let me take you back to where it all truly began. They never expected me to be anything but quiet. Growing up in the Stratton household meant knowing exactly who mattered. My brother Ethan, born with my father's posture, and my mother's blind faith in hierarchy, was groomed for the military from the moment he could stand. His first salute came before his first scraped knee. Mine came years later, in private, to a mirror with the door locked behind me. No one asked what I wanted. The expectations were already cast. Ethan would lead, and I would support. Maybe marry well, maybe teach. Anything but serve. When I told my parents I was considering the army, they laughed. It wasn't cruel at first, just dismissive the way people laugh at a child who claims she'll touch the moon. My mother tilted her head and said, Darling, there are better ways to feel strong. My father didn't even lift his eyes from the paper. I applied to West Point in secret. My grandfather's old friend, Colonel Dyer, wrote my recommendation letter. He said I reminded him of the old man stubborn in the right places. I clung to that. I needed anyone to see me as more than Ethan's shadow. When I got the acceptance letter, I didn't tell them. I packed in silence, bought my own boots, took a train at 3:42 a.m. from Raleigh while they slept. The day they found out, Ethan called me. I remember the line going quiet after I said I'm in. Then his voice clipped and cold. You'll embarrass them. You'll come back in a year. We all know it. But I didn't come back. Not for holidays, not for calls, not even when I was deployed. It hurt, of course. There were nights in the barracks where I would scroll through old photos, Christmas dinners, where I sat just outside the frame, birthdays, where no one remembered the cake. But after a while, the ache dulled. I learned how to carry it the way soldiers carry their packs, tight to the spine, close to the skin. In the 3rd year, I was assigned to a quick response medical unit overseas. It was supposed to be temporary. Then we lost our commanding officer to a roadside ambush. I was the ranking non-com left standing. Protocol said wait. Instinct said act. I acted. And we got out, barely. That night, the lieutenant colonel called me into his tent. His words were simple. You led like someone who's done it before. Then he handed me a folded note. I kept that note with me for 5 more years. Never showed it to anyone. Not even the ones who should have cared. When I returned home after an injury forced my discharge, I thought maybe foolishly they'd welcome me back. Instead, I got silence. Then, months later, a knock on the door from a clerk with legal papers. My family was suing me for faking what I had earned in blood. I didn't open the envelope for hours. It sat on my kitchen table like a ticking bomb, the courthouse seal stamped across the front like a scar. I already knew what it was. Ethan had sent a warning through his old friend at the VA. Tell Camille she's not the only one who can make claims. I thought it was just noise, empty threats. But it wasn't. Stolen valor. They were suing me under the 2013 federal clause that penalized those who fraudulently claim military honors for tangible benefit. I read the language twice slowly, as if slowness would make it less surreal. It didn't. According to the filing, I had misrepresented myself as a combat officer, accepted speaking engagements under false pretense, and most damning claimed decorations for unverified operations. Decorations I had never even publicly spoken about. I hadn't told anyone outside the Army what I'd done. Most of it wasn't declassified. Some of it never would be. I kept my records tight. Never posted photos. Didn't attend reunions. I thought staying invisible would keep me safe. I was wrong. The speaking engagement they mentioned. It was a community college panel, 10 people in a library basement. I was there to talk about leadership. I never said a word about combat. But someone had filmed it titled The Clip Female Commander Life on the front lines and posted it to YouTube. It went nowhere online, barely a few hundred views. But it reached the wrong inbox. My mother's. She sent the clip to Ethan. Ethan sent it to their lawyer. And just like that, the match was struck. I found out later why they'd done it. My grandfather, Major Walter Stratton, had passed the year before. Quiet man, sharp eyes, buried with honors. What no one told me was that he'd left a large military inheritance, not just medals, but a fund set aside for the family's continued legacy of service. The only caveat, the beneficiary had to be a direct military descendant with documented combat leadership. They didn't think I qualified. They thought I made it all up. For weeks I tried to push the lawsuit out of my head. Focused on my work at the recovery center, I ran for female veterans. Fixed generators, cooked meals, taught women how to wrap old wounds without reopening new ones. But it followed me every whisper, every stare, every funding delay that came after the news leaked. Donors stopped calling. One board member resigned. I didn't care about the money. I cared about the silence. The slow erasure. Like they were taking my name away one accusation at a time. Then came the subpoena. They wanted me in court, on record, under oath. I asked the judge for one condition, no cameras, just facts. He agreed, and so I prepared not to defend myself, but to remember who I'd been before they decided I wasn't real. The courtroom smelled like dust and old arguments. I sat alone at the defendant's table. No legal team, just a notepad and the memory of every order I'd ever given that saved someone's life. Across from me sat my brother Ethan, starched and smug in his blazer. Beside him, my mother, wrapped in grief she wore like couture, practiced deliberate. My uncle kept glancing at me, like I was an unexploded mine. The judge was careful, neutral, but the way he read Stolen Valor made my stomach twist. The prosecution opened with precision. They played the grainy video from that library, talked me in a plain button-down answering questions about decision-making under pressure. I never used the words combat special ops or command, but they dissected every phrase like a weapon. One clip where I said, "Sometimes the radio doesn't work, and you have to trust your gut," was presented as proof of exaggeration. Next came the paperwork. Gaps in my public record. No official decorations on file. No press releases. Just honorable discharge papers and a generic DD-2114 that said nothing about field command. Convenient silence. Then Ethan took the stand. He spoke with the ease of someone used to being believed. "My sister, Camille. She always felt overlooked," he said, folding his hands just so. "We worried she might try to reinvent herself for attention." He talked about our childhood like it was a crime scene. Told the court I had dropped out of college. I hadn't, I left for West Point. Claimed I'd always borrowed stories from other soldiers. Said I once claimed I saved a convoy alone. The courtroom nodded along. People love a narrative that fits. When it was my turn, I stood. Walked to the witness box without notes. I looked the judge in the eye. "My name is Camille Stratton. I served 11 years. 6 of those in active operations. 3 of those leading in classified missions. I was promoted in silence, and I returned in silence. I don't have medals to show you. I have scars. I don't parade." The prosecutor interrupted. "And where's the proof, Miss Stratton? Any names?" "Any witnesses?" I paused. They were ordered never to speak. Laughter rippled behind the prosecution table. Ethan smirked like he'd won. The judge raised a hand. "That's enough." We adjourned for the day. I gathered my things, slowly feeling the weight of everything they'd stripped away. But as I stepped out into the hallway, a court officer passed me a folded note. No name, just 5 words, I'm coming to testify. MH. I stared at the handwriting. I hadn't seen it in years, but I remembered every letter. General Matthew Harlan. And just like that, the game changed. The next morning, the courtroom felt different. The air had weight to it, like the room knew something we didn't. The judge entered without looking up, shuffled his papers, and said, "The defense has notified the court of a new witness." The prosecution objected. Of course, said it was procedural ambush, said it violated disclosure norms. But the judge glanced at me, then said evenly, "We'll allow it." That's when the back doors opened. The gallery shifted as a tall figure stepped into view. 4 stars gleamed on his shoulder. The room went still. Every uniformed veteran in attendance sat up straighter. Even Ethan's lawyer lowered his pen. General Matthew Harlan walked down the center aisle like he was back in formation, measured, deliberate, unshakable. He took the stand without hesitation. The prosecutor stood flustered. "General, are you aware of the nature of this case?" Harlan didn't blink. "Yes." "And I requested to be here." He turned to the judge. "May I address the room?" The judge gave a slow nod. Harlan leaned forward. Camille Stratton served with distinction. She led a classified operation in Shade Valley. When our commanding officer was incapacitated by enemy fire, Camille, then a staff sergeant, took command. He glanced toward me. She coordinated an overnight evacuation across 14 kilometers of hostile terrain. No radio, no reinforcements. 48 personnel survived because she didn't wait for permission to lead. The room didn't breathe. He reached into his jacket, withdrew a sealed folder. "Here is the declassified summary of Operation Nightroute, including my signed field notes. Page 6 has the map she drew from memory. Page 8, her plan. We followed it." The prosecutor objected again. "That mission isn't public record. This is unverifiable." Harlan smiled just slightly. "The mission was declassified 3 months ago. Check your own database." The judge took the file, flipped through it slowly, then set it down with care. Harlan wasn't finished. My own son was in that unit. He came home because of Camille Stratton. She carried him half-conscious through open fire. I saw her knees buckle at the evac point, but she never let go. My mother let out a breath, a soft one, but I heard it. Harlan looked toward the gallery now. "You want to talk valor? It's not medals. It's what you do when no one's watching, when no one will ever thank you. She didn't steal anything. She gave everything." He stepped down slow and deliberate. Before he returned to his seat, he faced me fully and offered a sharp, formal salute. I didn't move at first. Couldn't. But then I rose, my spine straight, chin lifted, and returned it. And for the first time in my life, my family couldn't say a word. Ethan didn't look at me. As General Harlan stepped away from the stand, Ethan kept his eyes fixed on the wood grain of the prosecution table, like if he stared hard enough, it might swallow him whole. My mother, on the other hand, turned pale. Her lips parted slightly, maybe to speak, maybe to deny, but no words came out. She reached for her pearls, then let her hand drop, unsure what she was reaching for anymore. The judge cleared his throat. Given the new testimony and evidence, he said this court finds no merit in the claim of stolen valor. Charges are dismissed. The gavel struck once. Sharp, final. The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. The silence was louder than applause. Ethan stood, but unsteady, like someone had cut the strings holding him upright. He turned toward the exit, then paused, half-glanced in my direction, but couldn't meet my eyes. He walked out without another word. My uncle followed, muttering something about media spin and planted stories. But no one listened. My mother stayed seated. I gathered my coat slowly. There was no rush now. Outside, the sky had cleared, light pouring through the tall windows behind the bench. I walked past her. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady. When I reached her row, she reached out, brushing the sleeve of my coat. "Camille," she whispered. I stopped but didn't look at her. "I didn't know," she said. Her voice trembled. "I didn't want to believe they were wrong about you." I nodded once, just enough to acknowledge the sound. Then I stepped forward toward the door, toward air that wasn't heavy with doubt. Outside, the courthouse steps were half empty. No reporters, no flashes. But at the base of the stairs stood a line of women, some in uniform, some in civilian clothes, all veterans from my recovery center. They didn't say anything. They just stood. And then, as I reached the bottom, they saluted. Not loud, Not performative, just quiet and absolute. It broke something in me, not in a painful way, but like a dam giving way to clean water. I returned the gesture slowly and let my breath out for the first time in days. This wasn't vindication. It was reclamation. That night, I didn't celebrate. I sat in my office at the center, hands folded over a worn notebook I'd carried through deployments. In the corner, a lamp glowed over framed photos, not of combat, but of garden beds, workshop tables, women welding steel with steady hands. They'd tried to erase me, but I had written myself back in. Ethan didn't look at me. Not when the judge dismissed the case. Not when General Harlan stepped down. Not even when I stood to leave the courtroom. He just sat there, shoulders square, but rigid jaw clenched, like he was still holding on to some last illusion of control. The same posture he used to have when we were kids, when he was caught lying, but refused to admit it. But this time, there was no one left to believe him. My mother sat frozen, eyes wide, but unfocused, her hands twisting the silk lining of her purse, like she needed something, anything to anchor her. For a moment, I saw the woman I used to beg approval, from the one who'd taught me to sit straight at family dinners, but never once asked what I was thinking. She looked older now, not in years, but in erosion. The judge's voice was steady, unemotional. This court finds no basis to proceed. The charges of stolen valor are dismissed in full with prejudice. This matter is closed. The gavel hit wood, not loud, but final. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just stood slow and deliberate, as if my body needed to feel every inch of gravity on the way up. Across the room, Ethan rose too, but his movements were stiff-forced. He picked up his briefcase like he didn't know what to do with his hands anymore. When our eyes finally met, his face twitched, not with regret, but something worse, shame that had no place to hide. He turned and walked out, saying nothing. My uncle muttered under his breath about influence and manipulated narratives, but even he didn't sound convinced. No one stopped him when he followed Ethan out. That left my mother. She didn't move, not even when the gallery emptied, not when the court clerk began packing up. I passed her row, and as I did, I felt a light touch on my sleeve. "Camille," she whispered. I stopped. But I didn't look down. I didn't know, she said again, her voice barely audible. "I thought," she stopped herself. "I thought you were lost." Her fingers trembled against the fabric of my coat. For a brief second, I almost wished I could comfort her. But that reflex died fast. "I was never lost," I said, my voice low. "You just never looked." I didn't wait for a reply. I walked out of that courtroom without spectacle, without headlines, without needing anyone to explain what had just happened. Outside, the air was colder than I expected. Crisp, clear, the kind that carries sound and memory too well. I took the stairs one at a time. At the bottom, I saw them 8 women from the center. They weren't in uniform, but they stood like soldiers. Some with their hands clasped, some at ease, one with her prosthetic arm resting gently on her hip. I hadn't asked them to come. I didn't even know they knew the court date. But they knew. And when I reached the sidewalk, they straightened and saluted. No commands, no fanfare, just silence. Earned. It hit me in the chest, hard and quiet. I raised my hand, returned the salute, and let the moment settle. No camera would catch this. No judge would record it. But it was more real than anything I'd been given by blood. Later that night, I sat alone in my office. The building was quiet. Outside, the wind pressed gently against the windows. On the desk in front of me sat the sealed case file General Harlan had left behind. I didn't open it. I didn't need to anymore. Some truths don't need to be defended. They just need to be lived. It's been a year. The lawsuit faded from public record in less than a week. No headlines, no retractions, just a quiet vanishing. But inside these walls at the center, we rebuilt brick by brick. It never disappeared. It became a story we passed down not for sympathy, but for truth. Not every war is fought on foreign soil. Some start at your own dinner table. Ethan never reached out again. I heard he moved to Florida, took a civilian defense contract job. My mother sent one letter, handwritten, trembling script. She didn't apologize. She just wrote, "I saw the way he saluted you. I understand now what I chose not to see." I never wrote back. But I folded that letter and slid it between the pages of the notebook I carried into deployment. Not to remember her, but to remember what clarity costs. General Harlan visits once a season. He never stays long, just sits with me in the garden out back, where the women from the center grow tomatoes and rosemary, and sometimes sing while they work. We don't talk much anymore. We don't need to. Above the front doors of the center, we carved new words into the wood. Not a motto, a promise. You don't have to prove who you are to be seen here. Sometimes I still wake up expecting to explain myself. But then I walk the halls, hear the quiet hum of welding torches, smell the soil after rain, and I remember I don't owe anyone a performance. I led when no one believed in me. Now I build so no one has to ask for permission ever again. And that to me is valor.